coordination in animals and coordination and response in plants برضه. We are going to start by coordination and response in animals. So I have to mention كده some terms that we are going to use throughout the whole chapter. بالنسبة لأول term, we have to know what is a stimulus. And the plural is stimuli. طب what is a stimulus? A stimulus that means a change. A change in either something outside the body, which I call the external environment. Environment هنا, it means the environment of the body. External environment means something outside the body, like what? Like, for example, light, like sound, whatever, smell of a certain thing in the air. This is called an external environment. And also there is an change in the internal environment of the body. But what does this mean? It means if anything happened inside the body, how can the body react with it or do to this stimulus? If there is, for example, light in the external environment, when light falls on our eyes, so we can see. So this is a stimulus, which is light that falls on our eyes to make a response. And the response here is vision. Now, sound, for example, it's just vibrations in the air. So when these vibrations fall on our ears, so this is a stimulus. So the response of the ear is to hear. But what about internal environment? For example, if there is food in the stomach, so the gastric juice or the digestive juice is going to be secreted in order to digest. But the presence of food is a stimulus inside the body that is going to, the body is going to respond to this stimulus by secreting gastric juice in the stomach so that it begins digestion. وفي a lot of stimuli and a lot of responses that I'm going to give examples عليها طبعا so long we are dealing with this chapter. This is the first term I'd like you to know. There is a second term which is called the receptor. Receptor is the part of the body that receives the stimulus. And these receptors, they are just specialized cells or certain kinds of cells that are specialized to receive any stimulus or to detect any stimulus. Now, if there is a stimulus that is detected, there must be a certain part of the body to respond to it. This part is called the effector. Effector means the part of the body that shows an effect or that shows a response to this stimulus, of course. So all what we are going to do in this chapter is to know what to have the stimulus, what's going to receive the stimulus, how is the body going to react by the effectors, and so on. But let me give you examples for the effectors. Mostly the effectors are either muscles or glands. Of course, we know what are the muscles. They are going to respond by contraction and relaxation, whatever. So what about the glands? The glands, these are certain organs in our body that will detect a certain stimulus and will respond by secreting a substance. Like what, for example? Like the salivary glands. Salivary glands, when even you smell food, you are going to begin to secrete saliva immediately. So smelling food is a stimulus, and the response is secretion of saliva by the effector gland. Adrenaline hormone. Yes, of course. ما دي بقى يا كنزي أنا بديكي example ل certain types of glands. لسه ما اتكلمتش على endocrine glands. يعني up till now في a part of this chapter it deals with all the endocrine glands اللي هي بتطلع hormones. طبعا انت كلامك صح. الادرينالين hormone when it's produced according to a certain stimulus is going to show an effect على الهارت وعلى الريسبيريشن وعلى المسلز وعلى every part in that gives energy to the body. Later on, I'm going to deal with the types of glands, but I'm just giving you an introduction now. Type. In animals, there is a very fast communication between the stimulus the receptor and the effector. In animals, there is a very fast communication and efficient communication between the receptors and effectors. It means if the receptor cell is going to detect a certain stimulus, immediately and very fast, the effector is going to act. Like what I explained now, if you smelled or even heard food cooking, then your saliva is going to pour into your mouth immediately without giving you any time for thinking even. There is a very fast communication, and this communication, of course, it is done by certain coordinating mechanisms in the body, or two systems for coordination. These systems are the nervous system and the endocrine system. The nervous system is something dealing with the nerves, the brain, spinal cord. The nervous system, its action is very fast action, but it's of a short duration. It means that it's going to act immediately, but its action is going to be lost immediately as well. Yani we say about the nervous coordination that it is short-lived. It means, yes, it starts fast and it ends fast as well. Yani if you want, for example, if you were touched a hot surface, for example, you're going immediately to take away or withdraw your hand. So this is a very fast response or a very fast reaction to the hot object that you have touched. This is a hot object was a stimulus. When receptor cells in the skin detected this stimulus, so very quickly your arm is going to be withdrawn. Is your arm going to be withdrawn for a very long time? No, you're going just to withdraw the arm to get rid of the harmful sensation, and then خلاص, the contraction of the muscles of the arm will stop. This is what's meant by a short duration, or in other words, it is short-lived. But what about the endocrine system, which is the system that deals with glands, certain glands that will produce hormones? Here, the effect is not fast. No, it is a slow effect, but it is long-lived or long-lasting. Whenever a gland secretes a certain amount of a hormone, this hormone is going to work for a long period of time until the gland produces another amount of the same hormone. And as I just said, that we are going to deal at the beginning with the nervous system and then the endocrine system. Now let's begin by the nervous system. The nervous system, or the human بقى طبعا, because our everything is dealing with humans, the human nervous system, it is divided into two parts. The main part, which is the central nervous system, and in the test you can write it CNS, all capital, and this is only formed of two main parts, which are the brain and spinal cord. Yani if I drew the brain like this is the brain, so it continues as the spinal cord. Yani the brain is up till here, and then this is its continuation is the spinal cord. Type, is this spinal cord extending forever? No, no, no. For adult human, it's about 45 maximum 50 centimeters long. only. Type. What about the other type or division of the human nervous system? It is something called the peripheral nervous system. When I was learning medicine, I never found any abbreviation like this, but some of the books, they wrote it PNS. I didn't even find this abbreviation in our book. يعني please write peripheral nervous system as it is. Peripheral means terminal, and this system is formed of our nerves. We have cranial nerves, which are the nerves arising from the brain, and we have spinal nerves, which are the nerves arising from the spinal cord. At the spinal cord, there are certain extensions of this spinal cord which are called the nerves, and I'm going طبعا to explain what is the nerve exactly, and it has nothing to do with being nervous or something like this. No, the nerve is a part of the nerve cell, just like that, an extension that's found in the nerve cell, as I'm going to explain right now. But we have certain nerves originating from the brain, so they are called the cranial nerves, and other nerves originating from the spinal cord. Okay, Abdurrahman, these are the spinal nerves. CNS means the central nervous system. Central nervous system, because this is the main part of our nervous system. While the peripheral nervous system, they are just nerves that extend from the central nervous system. Yani if I have the brain like this, we find cranial nerves extending of the brain and spinal nerves extending from the spinal cord. I'm going, of course, to show you a picture for يعني كده a gross picture. Just a second. Here they are. Just look at them, but they have nothing to do with us, and this is not important. Look here. Just a second. This is the brain, of course, and this is the extension of the spinal cord. Look at طبعا الcranial nerves, they do not في منها in the face وطبعا connected with other parts of the head and the body, and these are all the spinal nerves. Look how are they coming out of the spinal cord. The spinal cord ends before the ending of the trunk. Here. This picture is just to show you what's the meaning of nerves, spinal nerves, and cranial nerves. Now, the nervous system is a system like any other systems. Type, Veronica, what is the system made of? Give me the level of organization just below the nervous, the system. What's the system made of?
Like what organs?
Excellent.
Or
It is formed of organs. Type, Veronica, what are the organs formed of?
tissue?
Tissues, very good. Not only one tissue, يا Veronica, بتبقى different tissues. And each tissue is formed of طبعا the cells. This is true for all the systems of our body. طب ما هو nervous system is a system of our body. It means that its unit of structure and function is the cell as well. The cells of the nervous system, they are called the nerve cells. And this is just a descriptive word. Its scientific word is the neuron. Okay, the British books, they write it with an E, the American books with an N only. Whenever you find this or that, they have the same meaning. They are not wrong, but طبعا we are following the British system, so we have to write an E after the neuron. the neuron is the nerve cell. But I'd like you to know this, and this is the scientific term for the nerve cell. But what is this neuron? The neuron, we say that it is a specialized cell. But again, what's the meaning of a specialized cell? A specialized cell is a cell that has certain structure. With this structure allows it to perform a certain function. Now, because it is a cell, let me put back the picture على طول كده instead of wasting time. Now, this is the neuron or the nerve cell. All of this is one cell only. Look how it looks different, completely different from the cells that we know, because it has a main part which is called the cell body. طبعا it's not colored violet and yellow كده, لا طبعا. Look at here, this part of the nerve cell, it is called the cell body. And it has an extension. This extension is called the axon. Here is the word. The axon is the nerve. Right. So if I took this part is forming the material of the brain and spinal cord, while the rest or the axon is the nerve, or the axons are the nerves. The material of the brain is formed of about 100 million of these cell bodies, while these nerves are the nerves that extend from the brain and the spinal cord. Remember when I said that there are cranial nerves that extend from the brain? It means if the brain is formed of this part, so its extension is the cranial nerve. So this part forms the material of the brain, 100 million of this, of course, and this extension, it gives me the cranial nerve. A part, طبعا, of the cranial nerve. About the spinal cord, this part forms this material of the spinal cord, while the rest forms the material of the spinal nerve. Whenever we find an axon, so this is the nerve of the neuron, which is the nerve cell. Like all other cells, it has, of course, a nucleus, it has a cytoplasm, and it has a cell membrane surrounding all parts like this. What are these extensions? We have extensions on the cell body, and we have a very long extension getting out of the cell body, or extending out of the cell body. So let me take at the beginning these short extensions. These extensions are called dendrites. Dendrites. Now, what about this one? I just said it is called an axon. And this axon, it resembles how it is, يعني a nerve is formed of several axons like this. Right. This shape or this structure of the neuron is just an adaptation. And I mentioned before, what's the meaning of adaptation? Adaptation means a certain change that happens to a cell in order to allow it to perform its functions. Now, what's the function here? Because the nerve cell is going to look like this. The function of the neuron or the nerve cell is to transfer impulses. Now, what is this new word? An impulse is like an electric signal. Now, does this mean that we have electricity in our bodies? Later on, you are going to know that these are just electric or ions أو positive and negative charges that are found on chemical materials like sodium, potassium, chloride, whatever. All that you have to know in OL in these are electric signals, or we call them the electric impulses. The function of the neuron is to carry these electric impulses or the electric messages very quickly from one place to another. This axon may be from few millimeters اللينث بتاعه few millimeters to 1 meter in length, because if I have, yes, Abdurrahman, from where is the neuron connected to this? You heard me when I was saying that this part forms the material of the brain and spinal cord. I just said this, Ya Abdurrahman, about 2 minutes ago. The material of the brain itself, مش الbrain is an organ, it is formed of tissue, and the tissues are formed of cells. So the material of the brain, it is formed of, the brain is formed of about 100 million nerve cells. This part of the nerve cell only, it forms the material of the brain, and this part of the nerve cell only, it forms the material of the spinal cord. While the axon, it represents the nerves that extend out of the brain and the spinal cord. And I showed you the picture of the nerves. So the material of the brain, because the brain is an organ, so it is formed of cells. This part of the neuron or the nerve cell forms the material of the brain. Impulses, they are carried from the cell body along this axon to any other part of the body. But what about the dendrites? These extensions. These extensions, they are branches of a part here called, this part is called the dendron. If this is the whole structure is the cell body of the nerve cell, ففي عندي هنا thick extensions, these are called the dendrons, and they end in thinner extensions which are called the dendrites. It means that if this is the dendron, it branches more and more into thinner extensions called the dendrites. This is called the dendron. Okay, so here I have, مثلا in the picture, we have several dendrons that give more extensions, which are our thinner extensions called the dendrites. زي الارتري لما بيعمل extension أو branching فبيدي arterioles and capillaries. بس طبعا this is different. لكن I'm just telling you, like we have dendrons that branch more and more to give dendrites. فالدendrites, their function is to pick up the stimulus from a nearby place where they are found. They pick the stimuli in the form of impulses, and then they pass them to the cell body. If I have an impulse here, so these dendrites are going to pick up this stimulus in the form of impulses or electric charges or messenger or signals or whatever, and drive them to the inside of the nerve cell. Then these impulses are going to move from the cell body along the axon to the end of the axon in order to be transported somewhere else. If the impulse is found here at this area, or the stimulus at the beginning, this stimulus, I just said it's a change. This change is received by receptor cells I'm repeating what I said at the beginning. Receptors are going to change or to translate this stimulus into impulses, or change the stimulus into electric messages or signals or impulses. These impulses are taken by the dendrites. They are going to move like this to be transferred somewhere else. So if there is an impulse here, this impulse will be transferred to the other side. So this means that the function of the neuron is to carry the impulses very quickly from one place to another, because the impulse is going to pass through it. Type. If you looked at this axon, you're going to see that there are cells that are connected together like this in order to form the axon. طيب طبعا في ال OL احنا we do not clarify قوي what are these cells، بس طبعا I have to mention them. يعني if I have an axon like this, continuation of the cell body, so surrounding these axons, surrounding the axon, there are cells like this surrounding them. فأنا مش عايزة بتبقى الcell surrounding the whole axon كده from all aspects. These cells, they are called Schwann cells. And these cells, they are responsible for secreting a certain fatty material, mainly fatty. It's made of fat and protein, which is called the myelin sheath. A sheath means a covering, okay? Myelin, this is a material formed of fats and proteins. Kenzie, where does the myelin sheath come from?
From the Schwann cell.
Schwann cells, very good. They are secreted from Schwann cells. Type, look at this picture بقى. These are the myelin sheaths. This means that I have several Schwann cells scattered along the axon, and each one of them is producing or secreting this myelin sheath. If you looked here, there are certain gaps that do not have myelin sheath. These gaps are called the nodes of Ranvier, because this is the scientist. He was a French scientist and he discovered them. That's why they called these nodes by his name. Nodes of Ranvier. They are found in between the Schwann cells or in between the myelin sheath. في هنا عندي interruptions or gaps that are found in between the fatty material that is wrapped around the axon. These are called Schwann cells, and they do not have myelin sheath in them. But what's the use of this myelin? Let me tell you something. There are some nerves that have myelin sheath around, and they are called myelinated nerves. While there are other nerves that do not have a myelin, so they are called non-myelinated nerves. So what's the difference between them, and why there are some of the nerves myelinated while others are myelinated? If there is a myelinated nerve, this means that the impulse will pass through it in a very high speed. Yani if I have an impulse passing through a myelinated nerve, the speed of the impulse might reach 100 to 120 meters per second. Imagine this. The nerve is moving very, very fast if there is a myelin sheath around the axon. While if there is no myelin sheath around the axon, so the speed of the impulse is very, very slow. يعني maximum بتبقى from 5 to 10 meters per second. very slowly moving. This is the use or the benefit of having a myelin sheath. ان بيبقى فيه بتدي a very fast speed to the impulse passing through the axon or the nerve. على فكرة يا جماعة, the nerve, maybe, yes, I said this before, is formed of many axons. يعني بيبقى النيرف مثلا looking like this, يبقى معمول من axons كتير قوي, كتير, too many axons. وكل axon من دول طبعا is an extension of the cell body of the nerve cell. طب, are there types of neurons? Yes, there are. We have 3 types of neurons, or nerve cells. Types of neurons. We have the first type is called the sensory neuron. This sensory neuron, it receives the sensations. For example, like what? And it's connected, by the way, just a second. أنا نسيت أقول لكم حاجة مهمة. I'm going to return this back again, معلش. Look here, I forgot to mention this. These are the axon terminals. يعني when the axon ends, it ends in branches as well. The branches دي, they end in either a muscle or a gland. Or they are the beginning of the receptor cells. I'm going to explain this now على طول أول ما أحط types of receptors. But look here, the axon, it ends again in branches. But these branches, they are called the axon terminals. Terminal means the ending, okay? Type. The sensory neuron. These are the nerve cells that are connected to our sense organs. Yes, ya Abdul Rahman, what are our sense organs? لهم لي كده كلهم. أفتح الشات بس. Skin, nose, ear, what else? Tongue, very good. And the eye, excellent. يبقى السنس اورجنز بتاعتنا يا جماعه اللي هي السكين والنوز والتانج والاير والاي, these are called the sense organs, and these sensory neurons are connected to them. Type. What does this mean again? Remember when I said if light falls on the eye responds by vision. If you touched a hot object by your hand withdraws. So the hot object touches our skin. So the sensory neurons, they are found in our skin. They are found on the retina of the eye. They are found in a certain part of the ear. They are found in our tongue, tongue papilla. And if you looked at your tongue in front of a mirror, you're going to see that it is full of things like these. These are called papillae. And inside here, there are receptor cells connected to this nerve, sensory nerve. It means that these sensory nerves are going to collect or to carry the impulses from the receptors and transport them to the spinal cord and the brain. يبقى sensory neurons, they will carry the impulses from the receptor organs or the receptor cells and transfer the impulses to the CNS or the brain and spinal cord. Okay, the second type of neuron is the motor neuron. Motor here doesn't mean that it's something moving. No, motor here means that this neuron, or this, the nerve that is protruding out of the neuron, is going to be to transfer the impulse to an effector organ. طبعا قلت previously what's an effector organ. An effector organ is a muscle or a gland that are going to show an effect. فالmotor neuron it carries the impulses بقى from the central nervous system to the effector organs. Sometimes we call them the effectors. So I give you an example by these effectors, like the muscle and each muscle yani, and glands, because they are going to show an effect. So the motor neuron, it means that this neuron will carry impulses for making a certain action. That's why they call them motor. They carry impulses. طبعا impulses, they are carried here and they are carried here. Now, what about the third neuron? The third neuron is called the relay neuron. The relay neuron is passing impulses to other neurons in the spinal cord, or in other words, they are carrying impulses between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Relay, it has other names like connector neuron. Connector means it's connecting the sensory with the motor. And when I explain the reflex action, هنشوف relay neuron, what does it do? It connects the sensory neuron to the motor neuron وبتبقى in the spinal cord without passing to the brain. يعني لو ملاحظين هنا I wrote in the sensory neuron passes the impulses to the central nervous system, to the brain and spinal cord. الموتور بتيجي from the brain and spinal cord, but the relay, it connects the sensory to the motor neurons in the spinal cord without passing to the brain. You're going to know this يعني bit by bit كده when I explain something called the reflex action. Let's have a look at the types of neurons. Now, if you looked here, this is a motor neuron يا جماعة. The same shape that I showed you. كده عندي أهو cell body that forms the material of the brain and the spinal cord. These are the dendrites. They are going to get the impulses from the brain or spinal cord, and the impulse will pass through it along this axon, and it will end in the terminal branches in either a muscle or a gland. And I said before, instead of saying a muscle or a gland, effectors or effector organs. This is the motor neuron, and it's written on it. Now, what is this? This is the sensory neuron. Look at the difference between both. Look at the cell body. It is found in the middle. This is the axon terminals. It has, we here are the dendrites, okay? It has completely different shape from the motor neuron. This part is found in the receptor cells, or receive impulses from the receptor cells in the sense organs. The sense organs like the skin, the eye, nose, whatever, they have receptor cells, and these axon terminals, they are going to receive these impulses from the receptor cells and pass them to reach the spinal cord or the brain. But what about this? This is the relay neuron. The relay neuron, it is just a cell body, and the impulses will pass from, for example, from this one to this one, and then to this one immediately. Relay or connector neuron. وساعات يقولوا عليها the intermediate neuron. بس our book wrote الريلي، والريلي by the way is its scientific name. It is called the relay neuron فعلا. يعني لو قلت connector أو intermediate neuron, yes, they are correct. But the scientific name is the relay neuron. I'm that sure that you are so much confused. كل الconfusion ده is going to vanish when I start explaining how the nervous system works. I'd like to ask you, if you have any question concerning what I explained now, please ask me before I proceed to the central nervous system. If anybody has a question, are you confused?
لا يا دكتور تمام.
تمام الحمد لله. والله يا كنزي انت دايما كده زي ما بقول لك طول عمري من اول ما عرفتك على طول بتطمنيني كده ان everything is clear. عبد الرحمن وفيرونيكا طيبون، صباح الخير. We are there. Okay, can you answer me please?
There's a lot of new definitions, but it's okay.
It's okay الحمد لله. وعبد الرحمن لازم يجاوب في الاخر خالص. يعني when I ask a question على طول تلاقيه بيسابق. اوكي طيب الحمد لله الحمد لله. طيب دي حاجة كويسة إن you understand because your level is very high. أنا عارفة الحمد لله يعني. طب let's begin بقى by the central nervous system. Central nervous system, as I told you before, you can write it CNS all capital. Oh, by the way, this abbreviation is agreed on universally. العالم كله بيكتبها CNS like this. I just said that this nervous system, central nervous system, is formed of two parts. What are they, Veronica?
The brain and spinal cord.
Very good. Brain and spinal cord. And I just said that they are formed of neurons, or يعني, to be more accurate, from the cell body of the neurons, or the bulge كده of the cell body of the neurons. And the role of the central nervous system is coordination of impulses. It means the CNS decides which impulses to be received, how are the impulses going to move. This is the coordinator of our brain, of our body, the brain, the maestro of our body. It is running out, coordinating all our body. With spinal cord, as I told you before, this is an extension of the brain. Like, for example, the chairman and the manager. Yani, the chairman is managing the manager, and the manager is managing a company, for example. But the chairman is managing the whole company, including this manager. The central nervous system, it coordinates the impulses traveling through the nervous system as a whole. This is the central nervous system. It means that it coordinates what's happening in the nerves. It coordinates the peripheral nervous system. What's happening in the nerves, the brain and spinal cord coordinate them. Type. Peripheral nervous system, they connect all parts of the body to the central nervous system. As I said before, they are nerves and receptors. And they connect every part of the body to the brain and spinal cord. Together, they coordinate and regulate our body functions. So, how does this happen? The sense organs they are connected directly to the receptor cells. Or in other words, there are receptor cells in the sense organs. And these receptor cells, they are going to respond to any stimulus. والplural stimuli طبعا. Like, as I told you, light, touch, sound, temperature, chemicals. يعني when you smell something, whether good or bad, these are chemicals that are found in the air, and they produce this smell. فالstimuli, they activate or they are detected by the receptor cells in the sense organs. Type. When the receptor cells detect the stimuli, they immediately change these stimuli into electric impulses. Or electric signals, electric messages. And these electric impulses, they are going to pass along the nerves. It means the peripheral nervous system. Okay, and then they will reach finally the brain and spinal cord. طبعا spinal cord at the beginning, and then if there is يعني, if it's a must, so the spinal cord will convey these impulses to the brain. If it's a must, عشان أنا قلت إن في some actions they are لا يا عبد الرحمن لا, I didn't explain the reflex arc yet. No. ما هنا اللي بقول لك عليه إن if there is a must, so the impulses will reach the brain, but there are some cases اللي هو اللي انت بتقول عليه بقى the reflex arc او the reflex action, the impulses do not reach the brain, they just reach the spinal cord, والspinal cord بيتصرف. I told you before that the chairman is managing the manager, okay, or controls the manager, which is the spinal cord. طب ما المanager has the power of decision to make decisions without referring back to the chairman. فالspinal cord can return the impulse back, but in some cases only, without passing to the brain. Type. When the impulses pass to the brain and the spinal cord, so the brain and spinal cord are going to return impulses in the opposite direction, but along the motor nerves to the effectors, so that the effectors will show a response. Right. Let me explain what Abdurrahman was just asking about now, which is the reflex arc. And I just said that sometimes the spinal cord has to take an action without transferring the impulses to the brain to take its opinion what to do. The spinal cord can have the power, the potential to take an action to some actions, and these actions are called reflex actions. So what is a reflex action at the beginning, and then I'm going to explain the reflex arc. Reflex actions are fast, very fast, automatic actions. And the main aim of these reflex actions mostly for protection of the body. Fast means it happens very fast, يعني in a part of a second. Automatic means without even thinking that you are going to do it or not. Like what, for example? Like if you touched a hot object, you're going to take away your arm or hand very, very quickly. يعني do you stay for a time to think whether you withdraw your hand or not? Of course not. This is very fast. When you touch the hot surface, you take away your hand quickly. This is automatic, without thinking. and you are protecting your skin from being burnt. That's why I said mostly it is due to protection. But do I have any reflex actions that do not aim to protection of the body? Yes, of course. We have taken the digestive system, and we have taken that when we chew food and it makes us with saliva, it forms the bolus. When it reaches the back of the pharynx, immediately swallowing happens. Swallowing is a reflex action. It's not for protection, but it is a fast automatic action when the food touches the back of the pharynx, so the pharynx muscles contract to push the food to the esophagus. This is a reflex action. Okay, suppose you are, for example, I gave you an example at the beginning of the session. If you are hungry and you are going and you either you smell food or you even hear somebody cooking, your salivary glands will produce saliva. This is a reflex action. Did you think before telling the salivary gland to secrete saliva? Of course not. This is a fast and automatic action, and it does not aim to protection. But most of the reflex actions, they are protecting the body against a harmful thing. Suppose a car is driving very fast towards you. Are you going to think whether to run or to stay? No, this is reflex action. You are protecting yourself from any harmful object. Crying. لا crying ده something emotional بقى يا كنزي. It's not a reflex action. It's something emotional وبتبقى controlled by a part of the brain. البارت بتاع الايموشنز. في عندنا البرين بتاعنا في certain areas وفي centers. في center للايموشنز. Okay, this is something else. يعني if you want to cry, you can hold your tears. يعني it's not a must that you cry. But so when you touch a hot object, you're not going to keep your hand on fire, for example. No, you're going to withdraw your hand immediately without even thinking. Some people, they يعني examine themselves or challenge others that I'm going to tolerate heat for a certain time. So they keep their bodies touching a hot object, but they get damaged. And sometimes your conscious overrides the reflex action by your own will. But طبعا this will damage a part of your body. فالreflex actions are the concern of the spinal cord and not the brain. It depends طبعا on receptor cells, on sensory neurons, on impulses, but the impulses, they do not reach the brain. They reach the spinal cord and they return back to the motor nerves in order to make a response. Right. So, if I have a receptor cell, for example, in the skin, okay, and for example, a hot object touched the skin, so it's going to send impulses along the sensory nerve. And this sensory nerve will carry the impulses to relay neurons. خليني أقولها sensory neuron أحسن عشان يبقى كل الكلام زي بعضه. Neuron. Now, nerve is a part of the neuron. Relay neuron. This relay neuron is found in the spinal cord. And then impulses will return back along a motor neuron. And then the motor neuron is going to end up by transferring the impulses to the effector organ, whatever the organ is. أقول مثلا a muscle. يعني if you touched a hot object or you are pinpricked or whatever, so your receptor cells that are found in the skin, they are going to translate this stimulus, the hot object, into impulses, and these impulses will pass this way through a sensory neuron, then to the relay neuron in the spinal cord, then the impulses will pass, will return back, but through another neuron, which is the motor, to the effector organ. Of course, here, if I give you an example by touching a hot object, يبقى الeffector هنا, this is the muscle of the arm. So the arm is going to, the muscle is going to make a response. It's going to contract to withdraw the whole arm away from the hot object. If you looked at this shape, it looks like an arc. That's why they called it the reflex arc. So let me show you this reflex arc. And before I show you the reflex arc, I have to mention what are the parts of the reflex arc. The parts of the reflex arc are: number one, a receptor cell; number two, a sensory neuron; number three, a relay neuron; number four, a motor neuron; and number five, an effector. The reflex arc is formed of 5 components. Never ignore any one of them, because in the exam they ask you about what are the components of the reflex arc: receptor cells, sensory neurons, relay neuron, motor neuron, and then effector organ. These are called the components of the reflex arc. But let me put this picture to show you what happens exactly. I have 2 pictures, one from the old syllabus and one from the new book. I will show you both. This is from your book, the new one. Now I have here the skin, and there is a certain sensation of pain. For example, like a pinprick. حد لطيف كده وراح جاي يشكك بدبوس. Pinprick. Tick كده. So without thinking, you're going to take away your hand. What happened back? In the skin, there are receptors for pain. Pain receptors. And by the way, there are receptors for every sensation. يعني في السكين لوحده عندي receptors for pain, for touch, for pressure. What's the meaning? What's the difference between touch and pressure? Touching means that you just touch something lightly, but pressure when something presses on your hand, for example, or on your skin. السكين لوحده عنده pain receptors, عنده touch receptors, pressure receptors, heat receptors, cold receptors. What else? All the kinds of receptors of our the sensations that we feel by our skin, they are found in the skin. The pain receptors, they are going to receive this stimulus. The pinprick, it acts as a stimulus here. There is something, there is a change. طيب عبد الرحمن, is this an external stimulus or an internal stimulus? Stimulus from the external environment or the internal environment? External طبعا. Thank you. Thank you. E156 دي عبد الرحمن. I don't know what is this type. Okay. Right. So the receptor is going to change this stimulus, our pinprick, into impulses. So the impulses are going to pass along like this till here. طب Kenzie, which type of neuron is taking the impulse to the spinal cord? This is the spinal cord, by the way. Which type of neuron, ya Kenzie, is taking the impulse?
motor neuron.
Take care. This is just carrying sensation or the impulse of sensation. So which type of neuron is this? It moves. This is a nerve. Which type of nerve or neuron? carrying
relay neuron.
لا مش ريلي، انا بقول لك اللي جاي من
Sensory.
sensory طبعا. بصي يا كنزي، اللي جاي من السنس
that carries the impulses.
الامبلسز من السنس organ، يبقى sensory على طول. It is carrying a sensation, impulse of a sense of a certain stimulus. So this is a sensation. So this is a sensory organ. Sensory neuron دخل. بصي this is the spinal cord اهو، كل ده transverse section in spinal cord لحد هنا. This is a sensory neuron. Okay, and then here the relay اهو in the spinal cord. This part is the relay neuron. This is the cell body and this is its terminal. وبتعمل connection with the motor neuron that carries impulses in the opposite direction to the muscle. The muscle is going to contract in order to withdraw the arm away, or the hand away from the stimulus or from the pinprick or from the hot object or whatever. For this muscle, when it contracts, the whole forearm is going to be withdrawn like this. Okay? Here, because it moved like this and returned back, it took the shape of an arc. So this is called the reflex arc. Type. If somebody asked you, what is the reflex arc? You're going to say it's a pathway in of impulses to form a reflex action. The reflex arc is the shape of the pathway through which the impulses move in order to make a reflex action. A reflex action is when something, a stimulus happens, a fast, immediate, automatic response will take place. This is the reflex action. That's why I began the reflex action by saying that the reflex action is a fast, automatic action. Well, mostly for protection. If you are pinpricked, this is something harmful. If you left your hand is going to be, our skin will underlying tissue are going to be damaged. If you touch the hot object and you challenge yourself, how much time you can withstand this heat. You are staying for a few seconds, lekin you are damaging the underlying tissues and the skin is damaged as well. Reflex actions, they are mainly for protecting the body, while other reflex actions, as I said, is for making or for allowing a function to happen. Like, for example, when the food is found in the stomach, so the gastric juice is going to be secreted to digest the food. طب سؤال بقى هنا, Veronica, which type of food is partially digested in the stomach? Veronica زمانها خلاص قالت أروح منها فين. Which type of food is partially digested in the stomach? جعتكم كام chapter ورا.
Chyme.
Chyme is the food when it is mixed with the gastric juice. Which type of food? Which type of organic molecules? يعني when you, I'll give you choices. حد بينور اهو. كنزي هقتلك. هو الفايبر digested? The fiber is not digested. The undigested material passes in feces. انت قلتي لي الكلمه دي قبل كده. انا هديكي تشويسز يا فيرونيكا. عندك carbohydrates, fats, proteins. Which one of them is partially digested in the stomach?
Fat.
لا. عبد الرحمن بيحاول يقول لنا رأيه. حد بيجاوب، اتنين بيجاوبوا. بروتينز، يس، ايوه كده، بروتينز يا فيرونيكا. البروتينز are the only kind of food او organic molecules that are partially digested in the stomach, while lipids بتبقى completely digested in one step in the duodenum، لكن البروتينز بتاخد in the stomach, in the duodenum, in the ileum. الcarbohydrates in the mouth, in duodenum, in the ileum. لكن الليبيدز they are digested in one step only in the duodenum. احط لكم الدايجستيف سيستم في الكويز. يس، هو داخل في الكويز. الكويز is next Friday. Take care. من chapter 6 to chapter 10. يلا. طب why the reflex actions are useful? Because the messages they get from the receptor to the effector، يعني use of a reflex action بقى very fast action, and there is no time wasted, no thinking. طب why? For protection. Most of the reflex actions I just said for protection. طيب تعالوا بقى نرجع كده تاني to the nerve cell أو the neuron. Suppose I have a neuron here like this, like for example the sensory neuron, or the بلاش sensory خليها الموtor, and these are the dendrites. Of course there's no need to draw all the dendrites. I have here for example the relay neuron. They are different neurons, okay, and here are the dendrites. And I said before that the impulses in the spinal cord, they move like this from the relay to the motor. But how can they move? If you can see that I have drawn, طبعا لو if I tried to erase على طول, I have drawn this part. These dendrites, they are not touching each other. Now, how can the impulse jump like this? Does it jump? It does not jump. Now, how can the impulse move from here to there, and there is a gap in between them? This gap is called a synapse. And these synapses, they connect cell bodies of the neurons together. But how do they connect? And there is a gap. But let's take what's the synapse. The synapse is a connection between neurons, and it is formed of 3 parts. I'm going to put the picture of the synapse, وبعد كده I will show you an electron microscope picture of a real picture from the brain. Whenever I find 2 neurons, you're going to see that if this is the end of one dendrite, for example, this is the beginning of the other neuron. Yani I just said that if I have, for example, like this, if this is the neuron and this is the axon, here are the dendrites of the terminal branches. I have another neuron like this, and here are the dendrites. for example, like this. Okay, the impulses are going to pass like this and then to the other neuron. If you took this part, you're going to see that there is a gap in between. This gap is the synapse, and the gap here is called the synaptic cleft. Where is the word? No word. Narrow gap. طيب اكتبها. Synaptic cleft. Cleft means a gap يا جماعة. طيب. Before the cleft, there is the ending of this neuron, the terminal branches. This is one of them. It ends like a knob, like this. Okay, so when I said that this is a cell, I said there is a cell membrane, like all the cells. So this is a cell membrane. So I call this part the pre-synaptic membrane. Pre means before. Pre-synaptic membrane اللي هو بالتحديد ده. Okay, and all of it is called the presynaptic knob because it looks like a knob. Okay, طيب look at the other neuron here. Here is the beginning of the other neuron, and it is this part is after the synapse. So I call this membrane the post or the after يعني synaptic membrane. طيب يبقى the synapse is formed of 3 parts. The synaptic cleft, and before the synapse there is the presynaptic membrane, and after the synapse there is the postsynaptic membrane. خلاص امسح ده بقى. I don't want it. And let us see how the impulse is going to pass. Now, if I have an impulse moving like this, and it has to pass to the other neuron. This is one neuron ending, and this is the beginning of the other neuron. So the impulse is going to pass like this. If you looked here, you can see in this part very small sacs, vesicles. Remember the vesicle, the sac that can carry anything inside it. Inside this vesicle, or these vesicles, there are chemical materials that are called neurotransmitters. Transmitters. The word is found on the picture, but it's hazy a bit. Neurotransmitter. If you divided this word, neuro, it's something coming from the nerve or the impulse that passes along the nerve. Transmitter means that there is something that will transmit the impulse. I just told you, how can the impulse jump from one neuron to another? It's not jumping, it is carried. So here, these vesicles, they contain a neurotransmitter. The meaning of a neurotransmitter means a chemical material. Its function is to carry the impulses. Yani if you want the nature of this neurotransmitter, it's a chemical material. وفي several kinds of neurotransmitters in our body, يعني في البرين وفي الجunction between the end of the motor neuron and the muscle, في several kinds of neurotransmitters in our body. When the impulse reaches the end of one neuron, it triggers it allows these vesicles to move along like this. Then these vesicles, أنا نفسي أعمل لها Zooming in a bit. Yes, this is good. If you can see here that the vesicles connected with the cell membrane and they opened, so the neurotransmitter got out of the vesicles and filled this gap. Okay, so this is a kind again of transport where the vesicles, they are going to join with the cell membrane and open as if they are rupturing, so the neurotransmitter will diffuse out to fill this gap. Here, the impulse can be carried on these neurotransmitters. These are chemicals that will carry the charges that are coming, or the impulses, to the other side. Type. How can this happen? Let me draw this بقى أنا, because it's not written. It's written in the book, but it's not drawn. Suppose I have, this is the end, like this. And here are the vesicles open. And this is the other neuron. الother neuron يا جماعة بيبقى membrane, والمembrane has a protein زي ما اتفقنا قبل كده, cell membrane. البروتينز دي they have receptor sites. اوكي, يعني احنا اخذنا في الاميونيتي ان there are receptor sites, ودول بقول عليهم the antigens, and they can receive antibodies or things like that. نفس الحكايه, these are receptor proteins, but they will receive this neurotransmitter. يبقى لازم the neurotransmitter has a complementary shape to the receptors. طب neurotransmitter is carrying the impulses. So the neurotransmitter will bind to its receptors that have a complementary shape to that of the neurotransmitter. By this way, the impulses are going to be passed from one neuron to another. يعني أنا عندي هنا مثلا several neurotransmitter molecules are coming to be received on several receptor sites on the membrane of the other neuron. These neurotransmitters, they are carrying the impulse. They are transporting the impulse from here to there. By a neurotransmitter, it gets out of this neuron, carry the impulses, and join the receptor sites of the other neuron, so the impulses are transported from one neuron to the other. But what is the carrier here? The neurotransmitter. This is a certain way to transfer the impulses from one neuron to another. But where can we, and by the way, the movement is one way, from the nerve ending to the beginning of the neuron, the new neuron. أو ده طبعا لو حصل transfer of impulses between neuron number 1 and neuron 2. But what if the impulses are passing through a motor nerve? Take care of this. I'm going to ask now. What if the impulses are passing from along a motor nerve? يبقى where will the impulses go يا كنزي؟ قلبك وقع. يعني here كل واحد مستني الدور على مين. زمان فيرونيكا قالت thank God الحمد لله مش السؤال مش ليا. فيرونيكا حرام اكتر واحده بتبقى بتصدم ما بقول اسمها. يس يا فيرونيكا اور نو؟ اصل الكويستشن بيجي. I know حبيبتي
I'm more of a listener.
الكويستشن بيجي فجأة كده وكل واحد مستني. يعني I give you a warning, there's a question coming. كل واحد بقى بيقول مين اللي عليه الدور. Yes, you can. You still remember the question?
No, can you repeat it?
Okay. أنا عندي this is مثلا a motor nerve. ماليش دعوة بدي. This is a motor nerve. Where is it going to end? أنا أعطيت لك حاجتين effector بس give me two examples.
يعني مثلا عند الدنتراي بتاع الأذر نيورون.
لا بصي أنا لو عندي كده this is a motor neuron like this. أخذ الإمبلس من نيورون تاني زي في الريلي كده. أخذ الإمبلس من الريلي مثلا and the impulse is going to move. Where is the impulse going؟ لو ده موتور نيورون. ما دام موتور يبقى رايح فين؟ يعمل ايه؟ يا حد بيقول حاجة. just a second. يا رب تكون كنزي.
رايح للإفكتور.
Yes, yes يا فيرونيكا طبعا. But give me example for this effector. أنا قلت لكم two effectors يعني هما الإكزامبلز اللي عليكم.
المسلز زي ما حضرتك قلتي.
muscle very good. طبعا يا عبد الرحمن. or yes عبد الرحمن قالها muscle or gland. طيب أنا عندي muscle. This is the end. أسألك يا عبد الرحمن دلوقتي. And this is the muscle. For example, like this. Is there a synapse here as well or not? إيه رأيك؟ Is there is والسؤال ليكم كلكم يا جماعة. Is there is a synapse here or not? Between the nerve ending ده and the muscle. What's your opinion? No. طيب بصوا بقى يا جماعة هي yes. بصوا بقى. Whenever خليها دي يعني a certain hint كده in your brain. Whenever the impulse transfers from any part to another, there must be a synapse. لازم. If there is an impulse that's transferring between two neurons, there is a synapse between them. If the impulse is transferred from a neuron to a muscle, there is a synapse between them. If there is an impulse transferred from a neuron to a gland, there is a synapse between them. يبقى معنى كده إن whenever there is a connection, يبقى there is a synapse. Nothing is connected together, complete connection. There is a cleft or a gap in between any part that is connected to another part, or any nerve that connects either to one nerve. Okay, Abdurrahman. Okay. Whenever there is a connection between a nerve and anything else, either connection between a nerve and أو بلاش nerve خليها neuron أحسن. Whenever there is a connection between a neuron and another neuron, there must be a synapse. Whenever there is connection between a neuron and an effector بأنواعه, there must be a synapse. Whenever the impulse needs to go from one place to another, it has to be carried on a neurotransmitter. خلاص؟ يبقى أي connection, there is never a fixed connection. لا, there must be a gap between any ending and the beginning of the other thing, and this gap of course is called the synaptic gap, or يعني briefly كده بقولها a synapse. ودايما impulses they are moving in one direction only and never the opposite. Why بقى؟ لأن يعني take care of this يا جماعة. Take care of this part. I said that the impulse is moving in one direction. Okay, طب why بقى؟ I'm going to draw this هنا بقى على جنب. This is the presynaptic or before the gap. And this is the postsynaptic or after the gap. وممكن يكون a muscle. postsynaptic برضه يعني بعد السينابس. postsynaptic يعني after the gap. طيب دايما the part before the gap is the part that has the vesicles that contain the neurotransmitter. Okay? The part after the gap, no vesicles. يبقى the part before the gap اللي هي دي is the part that has the vesicles filled with the neurotransmitter. لكن the part after the gap there are no vesicles at all. That's why when the neurotransmitters our vesicles they come to open or they move and they open like this, the neurotransmitter is going to fill this gap. فالimpulse will pass in this direction only, not the other one. Why? Because the part after the synapse does not contain vesicles. No vesicles. هتجيب منين neurotransmitter? That's why the passage of the impulses is only in one direction. If there came a question, suggest why the impulses move in only one direction across the synapse. You're going to say because in the part before the synapse or the presynaptic knob, it contains the vesicles and not that carry the neurotransmitter and not the postsynaptic membrane or knob. وزي ما قلت لكم postsynaptic ده they can be another neuron or they can be a muscle or a gland. طيب, let me return back to this picture of the reflex arc. Here, there is a connection between the sensory neuron and the relay neuron. يبقى this part has a synapse. بس طبعا في البيكتشر مش مرسومة. Synapse. Here, at the end of the relay and the beginning of the motor, there is a synapse. خلاص؟ فأي between this motor nerve and the muscle, there is another synapse. يبقى whenever there is an impulse that will pass from one part to another, from one place to another, there must be a synapse. طيب, دي مثلا example of synapses in the spinal cord. What about the synapses in the brain بقى? الbrain, as I said before, that it is formed of these parts only. يبقى there are synapses between parts, the nerve cells or the neurons that form the brain. I told you before that the brain is formed of 100 million. This number is not written in the book, but it's correct, 100 million nerve cell bodies. And this part is called the nerve cell body. The rest is called an axon. There are several connections. All the 100 million nerve cell bodies, they are found. They have synapses because they are interconnected together. But why are there interconnection, very enormous interconnections in the brain? Because you can do several functions in the same time. Yani, for example, I am now seeing, I'm hearing, I'm talking, I'm breathing, I'm إيه تاني? I'm feeling in the same time. Plus, inside my body, my intestines are working, my kidneys are working, my heart is working, every part in the body is working in the same time. Why? Because all the neurons that form the material of the brain, they are connected together. So every part of the body can work in the same time. Let me show you a picture كده. برضو it's not found in the book, but you have to see how are these connections found. And by the way, this is a very small part of the brain. يعني قولوا مثلا بالميكروميتر كده. Look at this. These are connections of the brain. Can you see this? Or I can reshare again. Look at these structures. دي original picture على فكرة. True picture. بصوا these ones, these are the cell bodies اللي أنا كنت برسمهم كده. Look at all these are the dendrites connected together that form synapses together. كل الكعبلة دي synapses all through the brain. في another picture بس لا دي model. So I'm going to show it to you. This is a model. It's not a true picture طبعا. This is the cell body. And here this is another cell body. Here are all the synapses أو between the dendrites. والlit parts دول are representing the impulses. إن الimpulses بتعدي كده أو جاية كده أو جاية كده and so on. From one neuron to another through the or across the synapses. Okay. Type. And as I said that it is a one way, like acting like evolve, one way, because it moves the impulse in one way direction and never in the opposite direction. Why? لأن the neurotransmitter is coming from one synapse and not in the other. There was another picture. Let me look at it. لا. يعني okay. Let me show it to you. The reflex arc اللي قلت لكم كانت موجودة في الأولد syllabus. This is a reflex arc as well. هنا أنا عندي a pin أهو and it's pricking. فالreceptors receptor cells they are going to receive or detect this stimulus or the pain that was done by the pin, and the impulses will pass through the sensory nerve to here to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord, a transverse section, or if I cut the spinal cord transversely. Look at the, this is a sensory neuron, and I said that the sensory neuron, its cell body is in the middle. It receives impulses or translates the sensation by in the form of impulses that will pass like this. Here is a synapse. Look, there is a gap in between. This is the relay. لها اسم كمان اهو interneuron, intermediate or relay or interneuron communication whatever. فهنا في عندي اهي synapse, and then the impulses are going to move like this, another synapse, and then this is the motor nerve that is found in the muscle, another synapse. يعني هنا عندي synapse اهي وهنا في synapses again. The parts of the spinal cord, لا, you don't have to know them. Right. I was explaining receptors, and I said that they are found in the sense organs and things like that. But let us study one of these sense organs. One of them, which is the eye. طبعا in mammals, as I told you before, that the receptors are part of a sense organ, or cells that are found in a sense organ. But this eye is a very good example for the sense organs, and it contains its receptor cells are two types of cells. We know that the eye receives light, okay? And the light can be dim light or can be bright light. If there is dim light or the light is not very good, you will not recognize the objects by their own color. Yani if you entered a room and you didn't put on the light, but you can see. Can you see any colors? No. You are going to see black and white only, or black and gray, because there are receptor cells in the eye that receive only the black and gray color if it is dim light. These types of receptor cells, they are called the rods. And they look like rods, يعني مش rods قوي يعني, but they look like rods. While other kinds of receptors will receive a light or the bright light, so we can see the colors. And of course, there is more clearer image. These are called, the receptors are called the cones. So in the eye, we have two types of receptor cells. The receptor cells are the rods and cones. Rods are responsible for vision in dim light, and the vision is not very clear, and the cones are responsible for vision in bright light, and vision is clear. And you can see all the colors. Type. Let me put a picture to the eye in order to study its structure together. What's the eye formed of? طبعا, this is a longitudinal section of the eye. يعني if I have, of course we know, طب let me zoom this out again. The eye, if I have, بس ما حدش يضحك, ها? This is the skull. هذا يقول لي شبه Pac-Man. Where here are openings in the skull, like holes in the skull. These holes, they are called the orbits. And the eyeball is found inside the orbits. So if this is the skull or the bone of the head, these are the eyeballs. Now, why did I say the eyeballs? Because it looks like a ball فعلا. If I took this eyeball and I cut it into two, I'm going to see the picture in front of you. So this is called a section, a longitudinal section in the eyeball, and let us study together what are the parts of the eye. It seems that I'm going to خلي الother picture بعدين بقى. Now, if you looked in the mirror out to anybody, you're going to see that the eye from outside looks like this. There is a colored part here, which is called the iris. And there is in the middle of the iris, there is a black hole. This is called the pupil or the eye pupil. and there is a white part around. This white part is called the sclera. Okay, but we all looked at our eyes. There is a white part surrounding the iris, or the colored part of the eye. Whatever the color is, brown, green, blue, whatever the color is. Type. What is this white area? Here. If you looked at the eye, you're going to see that it is formed of layers. An outer layer, ده الايبول كلها بقى. يعني this is the upper eyelid يا جماعة. Okay? Sorry, the skull, الupper eyelid هنا. Like this. And here are the eyelashes. And here is the lower eyelid. And here are the lower lashes. For what you see in front of you in the mirror, if this is the eyelid like this, here and there, then you are seeing this part only. اللي هي here. Okay, if I looked at the longitudinal section of the eyeball, I'm going to see that it's formed of 3 layers. This is the outer layer coming from behind the eyeball and extending to the front. This part, or this outer layer, it is white in color and it's called the sclera. And it extends like till here, or from below, this is the outline of the heart, it extends till of the eye and extends till here. يبقى السكليرا, it extends from behind to reach the front till here, and from behind to reach the front till here. This is a white colored solid part. يعني if you pressed a bit, مش بقى بالجامد تفعصوها. If you pressed a bit on your eye, it's solid, somewhat solid. Because of the presence of this outer layer, which is called the sclera. This is the, of course, it's colored here light pink كده, but actually it is white in color. Right. In front of the sclera, in the front of the eye, the sclera is covered with a very thin membrane. You can see it, of course. أو مش عارفة تبان أكتر. Yes, it is clear. في عندي هنا an outer membrane. If you can see it, it's covering here and extending like this. This very thin layer is called the conjunctiva. Conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is just a transparent, protective, thin layer to protect the front of the eye. This is transparent. That's why we see the white sclera behind. يعني اللي احنا بنشوفها دي السكليرا, و on top of it the conjunctiva. But the conjunctiva is transparent. That's we can see behind. اللي هي white layer, which is called the sclera. Type. This conjunctiva is always moist. Conjunctiva is always moist. طب why بقى? Because right here is the upper lid, as I told you before. An upper lid. Do you know what's an upper lid? An eyelid? Yes or no? It is the covering. When you blink your eyes, you're covering your eye by the upper eyelid. Oh, they are one word. Okay, yes, they are one word. Type. An upper eyelid, just below it, بيبقى فيه a gland like this. And this gland secretes tears. It is called the lacrimal gland. or you can say the tear gland. But it has a name, يعني either this or that, but it has a name. يعني هم قايلين the tear gland, yes, in the book they wrote the tear gland, لكن it has a name if you like to know it. This tear gland, it always secretes tears. يعني tears are not secreted just when we cry or when something enters your eye, your eye becomes wet. No, the tears, they are always secreted out of this tear gland, always. And whenever you blink your eyelid, blinking means to close the eyelid and open it even without feeling. يعني احنا while you are staying مثلا awake, all of the time you are blinking your eyes. This blinking means that the upper eyelid, it closes and opens again. This blinking makes the eyelid covers the eye and returns back again. And because there is a lacrimal gland here that secretes tears all the time, so when the eyelid is closed, it is covering the outer part of the eye by tears. And that's why the conjunctiva is always moist. But why does this happen? Because if we do not blink our eyes, the conjunctiva is going to dry up. And if the conjunctiva dried up, by time, if somebody has a dry conjunctiva, by time they are going to be blind, because this is going to be very dry. It's going to be whitish in color when it dries up, and this lead, of course, they will never see again. Because the conjunctiva is going to be opaque, so they are not going to see. Yani we are seeing because the conjunctiva, although it's found in front here, but it is transparent and light can pass through it. If this conjunctiva became opaque because it is dried up, so of course light cannot pass through opaque bodies. Sometimes you challenge yourself to keep your eyes wide open like this without blinking. Do you know that you are going to feel something burning in your eye, burning sensation? If you can try it now. Keep your eye open without blinking. Challenge yourself that you're not going to blink. Your eye is going to feel a burning sensation, and you are obliged to blink your eyes. So this is
because of what? The conjunctiva, because it becomes dry?
Yes, because it becomes dry, so you feel this sensation. عارفين اللي بيعملوا surgical operations, maybe you saw this in movies, they put to them like ointment in their eyes, مرهم كده, in the eyes, to keep the conjunctiva moist, because when somebody is unconscious, they are doing a surgery or بيعمل surgical operation, their eyes are not closed completely. Their eyes are open midway كده, they put an ointment in order to save the conjunctiva from dryness, to keep the conjunctiva moist, or else when the surgery lasts for even half an hour, the conjunctiva will dry up and they are going to wake up blind. That's why they have to moisten the conjunctiva, and that's why we are always blinking, so that our conjunctiva becomes moist. Okay, but again, the conjunctiva is a transparent protective layer that is found in the front of the eye, and it is always kept moist in order to keep the conjunctiva, to protect the conjunctiva from dryness. The tears that come from the eye, they protect prevent dryness of the conjunctiva, and they have a very important function. These tears, they contain lysozyme enzyme. الlysozyme enzymes, these are enzymes that kill bacteria. So the tears now, they do not only protect the conjunctiva from drying, they protect the whole eye from bacteria. This is a protection method. يبقى because we are always secreting tears without feeling, so we are always protected against dryness of the conjunctiva, against blindness طبعا, against bacteria, because of the presence of this enzyme that destroys bacteria. طيب, where of course these tears, they wash the eye while blinking the eyelids, or in the blinking movement of the eyelids. This is the word, by the way, blinking. احنا بنقعد نبربش كده طول ما احنا قاعدين. Okay, ف this blinking movement of the eyelid, while the eyelid is closing and opening, it is washing the front of the eye by tears. طيب, let's go behind بقى a bit. As you can see here, this is the sclera, which I just mentioned. It is a tough layer. Why بقى is it tough? Or somewhat hard, in order to prevent the folding of the eyeball. It prevents the folding of the eyeball. It protects the eyeball from behind or from inside. And all the circumference of this sphere or this eyeball is protected by the toughness of the sclera. Or else بقى كانت our eyes are going to fold بقى وتبقى شكلنا عامل ازاي ساعتها بقى. عينينا مطبقه كده وحاجه. طيب. Just next to the sclera, if you can see, there is a black line, the black one, مش the gray one inside, the black one. Look at this black line, and from here as well. This is called the choroid. CH, but it is pronounced choroid. It's a black layer فعلا that is found just in front of the sclera and just behind the outer layer of the eyeball, which is called the retina. يبقى the gray layer is called, ولا دي violet ولا ايه مش عارفة. This layer is called the retina. Just behind it is this black choroid, and it's colored black فعلا. طب why black بقى? Because when the light comes through the eye, and the light of course is going to fill all the parts of the eye, the retina is transparent as well. So the light, I don't want it to fall on any part of the eye but the retina. فالchoroid is black in color in order to absorb all the light after it has passed through the retina, in order to prevent the scattering of the eye, of light inside the eye. احنا عايزين الlight to be focused only on the retina. فعشان كده the layer just next or just inside the retina is black in color, and we know that the black color absorbs the light. الوايت دايما والlight colors, they reflect the light, but the black, it absorbs all the light colors. If light falls on the retina, so it falls only on the retina, not in other part of the eye, because of the presence of this choroid, which is black in color, absorbs the light and prevents its scattering away from the retina. And يبقى ده بيعمل absorbing of the light, وفي نفس الوقت this layer contains a very rich blood supply. It's very rich in blood capillaries. ليه بقى? Because the blood inside the capillaries here the blood here nourishes the retina, provides the retina with nutrients and oxygen, because the retina does not have a blood supply. لا, بتبقى nutrition and oxygen reaches the retinal cells from the blood capillaries that are found in the choroid. طيب, I'm going to stop here, where inshallah next time I'm going to complete the eye. It's going to be on Tuesday at 6:30. Yalla, see you inshallah on Tuesday. What's today? It is Saturday. Okay. And study well, please, for the quiz. Please. Don't forget to submit your homework. Yalla, bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Bye.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.